Hello, everyone. Hey. Hey, Lavinia. Welcome. Hey, Elizabeth and Katja. How are you? Hi, everyone. I hope you were doing all right. Such a pleasure to have you here with me today. And thank you very much, SBS, for the event. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm really glad that you could make it today. Well, if you don't know me, my name is Tamires, but you can call me Tami. All right. I was born and raised in Osasco. Some of you know that I'm really passionate about the place where I'm from. I live in Osasco, which is known for hot dogs. I don't know if you know, but Osasco is known for the capital of the hot dog. If you were if you pay me a visit, I can take it to a very good hot dog stand. So then I've been a teacher for over 10 years. Actually, to be more precise, this year it's been 12 years since I delivered my first lesson. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm a teacher trainer as well. I've been training teachers since 2018, and today I'm here to share with you one of my favorite topics, which is about A1 learners. I don't know if you like this level, but I know some teachers tell me, Tammy, I guess this is the most difficult level to teach. Actually, I've got two levels that I really, really like, A1 and C1. It's kind of controversial, isn't it? But then I hope that you have some fun with me this afternoon. If you wanted to include any comments, I promise I'll be presenting and then I can take a quick look at the comment session over here. All right? So let's get down to business. Actually, before we talk about the A1 learner profile and what it takes to teach this level, I'd like to invite you to think about learning as this journey and some things that we need to consider in order to take our students to this journey and to make it a bit more smooth for them. When we teach A1 learners, most of them come with some fears. They had been exposed to several kinds of methods before, or they had been exposed to different kinds of schools. Some of them complain they know nothing, but they are not aware of how much English we see on a daily basis. So we needed to be a bit more aware of how to help these learners who are so afraid at times to take this step into their learning journey. I would like to start by facing this journey and take into account the CFR level. How familiar are you with the CFR? You can write down on the comment section. Yes, Flavium, I completely agree with you. Most of the students, they are a bit traumatized. And to some students, especially some private teachers, they tell me that students see them as their last resort. And you see how much pressure these teachers have. So sometimes we need to also align expectations with the students and trying to get a framework in which students won't feel judged, or getting some strategies to help them boost their confidence will be of the essence. Liza mentioned that she has no idea about the CFR. Who else? You can comment here while you write it down. I'll be talking more about the CFR. Well, if you are not familiarized with the CFR is the Common European Framework. And as we have seen in the acronym, it is a framework, and then it is something that has some stages, and there are some levels in which students are exposed to. So the idea is how is the CFR going to help me with my A1 learners? Am I going to be showing them the CFR and tell them all the things that they cannot do or the areas for improvement? How can I help them to build more confidence? So, as teachers, we need to take a look at the CFR from the standpoint that it is going to be something to help us inform them the areas that they have performed well. So the CFR is not going to be something to just bring this divide to students. You do this well, you don't do this well. So then, this is why I told you that I would like to start our talk today by inviting you to revisit or to get to know more about what the CFR is. So, having said that, there is this very good document from the Council of Europe. It is available on the internet. You don't have to pay for it, but I would say it is this companion volume in which you're going to find everything about the CFR, the history behind it, the key principles, premises, what each level entails. A1 learners, A2 learners, B1, B2, C1, C2. And for teachers, this is so important because at times we get some books and then we just look at the cover of the book and it is written A1, A2. But what is that? So, which competences do my students need to have in order to be ready to take this challenge of this book? So, I guess it is something great for us at the beginning of the year to set some goals to get more familiarized with it in order to make better decisions for the learners as well. And also, when we are trying to look for materials for ourselves as teachers, because teachers never stop learning, right? I'm sure that you haven't stopped a single day. So this is great for us to get to know more what is the CFR. So I would say that there's something that we needed to take a look at before we move on in the conversation here. The CFR was a document, and when I say document, it is not just a version of this document. Previously, there have been different versions of the same document in order to establish different levels of proficiency. So students, they would be organized in learning a language, but they would be organized in learning these languages in different levels. So we see that nowadays we do have the A1 level, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. It doesn't mean that a student one day it is an A1 student, and then on the following day it is going to be an A2 student. It takes some time, and then it takes some topics for students to be exposed. It doesn't mean that if I have an A2 student, I can expose this student to this A1 level topics. But then we need to be aware that when it comes to the A2 level, there will be lots of topics that the students are going to be exposed to for the second time, and then they are going to be revisiting and expanding their knowledge. So this is why the CFR really helps us to better analyze areas for improvement and to check students, actually to put students in a way that they see their progress on the way. So as I told you, it was planned. Actually, it had been planned before, but this document was really well consolidated between 1970 and 1980. So this it is not only in Europe, as you can see the name, it is Common European Framework, but it is something that it is not only in Europe. It has been widespread since then. And then the aim of this document was to broaden this perspective of language education. Besides the idea of having this common European framework, or this framework was to help in the transparency and coherency when we are assessing students. So then, the thing is, the first thing that some teachers come, actually, let me rephrase it. The first thing that comes to mind when I show the CFR to some teachers, they believe that it is only about assessing. But assessing is only one of the pillars for the CFR. The main pillars would be learning, teaching, and assessing. So here we would help the students to better understand their learning process and the topics that they need to be exposed to. This would help the teachers to teach the students in a better way, and then And the last one would be assessment. So it is not only for this perspective of testing students. So then, the CFR views language as this vehicle for opportunity and success in social, educational, and professional domains. So it is not only for students to acquire the language, but the way that they deal with the language on a day by day. So social, actually, the CFR also encourages teachers and students to use the language in social contexts. So students are also developing social skills when it comes to learning a language. And at times, I don't know if you feel this way, we focus too much on what they are learning. For instance, there are students that they tell me, "Tell but I've already learned the past." And then I take a deep breath and then I say, all right, you have learned the past, but what about using the past in this social situation, in this social interaction? So we really needed to remind students that learning a language is not only learning the structures or the chunks, they also need to know how to behave. So this is a very good perspective for us teachers to see and to use the CFR. So here, there's something very interesting about the CFR, which is the can do's. Are you familiarized with the can do's? Have you ever heard of it? While you think about this question, I'm going to take a look at some of the comments. Eduardo, couldn't agree with you more. Aligning expectations may be also very effective in order to lower effective future. Definitely, Eduardo. I call actually when I receive my students. Most of my students are adult learners, and I have a day zero with them, especially if they are A1 students. For this day zero, what I usually do is I talk to them. We had previously talked because I've got this onboarding with them. So then we have a needs analysis moment. I talk to them about their abilities. I ask them about how they were as students at school, which subjects they liked the most. And then I try to align expectations. So in 6 months from now, how do you see yourself studying English? Some of them, they come with that speech saying that, Tami, I wanted to be fluent in 1 year. So then we need to align expectations. Eduardo, couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. Yes, it does take time as well, Eduardo. Yes. And these learners' skills, they may vary. And this is why when we get to the CFR and then we see the descriptors, we need to be aware that some learners, they take some time to master some skills. For instance, some learners, they take more time to master the simple present. It doesn't mean that they're going to be just studying the A1 level for ages. For instance, I do have some students that are B1 students going B2 that they still make some mistakes. Okay, because it happens, mistakes they happen on the way, used by using third person. So we needed to accept that taking learning languages take time, right? And as I've asked you about the can do's, we are going to see what is the connection between the can do's and nurses and teachers. Do you have any idea? I'm going to give you 45 seconds to write down on the chat here. What is the connection between nurses and teachers when it comes to the can do's? Yes, I'm reading some of the comments here, Eduardo. Precisely, precisely. Yes, some teachers focus too much on grammar, structure. Yes, definitely, definitely. Oh, hey, Barbara. Good afternoon. Nice to see you here. Nice to see you here. Hey, Italy. Are you all right? So, while you think about the connection between the teachers and nurses and the can do's, I'm going to show you what this idea of the can do's come from. The can do's, they are descriptors that they describe the competences students they have. But then, before I show you some can do's, I'd like to show you what is the connection between nurses and teachers. This idea of calibrating can do descriptors. originally came from the field of professional training nurses. Did you know about that? They came to the conclusion that tests were not very helpful in assessing a trainee nurse's competence. So, what was needed was a systematic, informed observation by an expert nurse, guided by short descriptions of typical nursing competence at different levels. So, here the idea was not to test what learners did well or not. But then, this idea of the descriptors of what was expected from that nurse at that level was way better. And this idea of this can do approach was transferred to language teaching and learning. So, remember that I told you that this document was compiled around 1970, 1980. So, this idea of the Candos was transferred to learning the language. So, this way, students were seen as human beings who were progressing and developing their own strategies that they would be able to perform well or not, to show areas for improvement that which wouldn't undermine their production. You see, so it would be very different from just a testing. He passed or she didn't pass, but then the idea of to see what students were able to perform. So, not to working on students' deficiency. So, here I brought to you some A1 Candos. Um, can you guess the words that I have covered? Any ideas? Hey, Gladys. Gladys here as well. Hey, Katya. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes. Gladys, I completely agree with you that nurses are a bit strict as well. They are. They are. Yes. Yes, this idea of the can do's, I had no ideas before I studied the CFR, but I thought it was pretty interesting to see that there was something from this health field coming to our language field. So then I brought some of these can do's for us to analyze today, and this is basically what a A1 student can perform well. So I covered some keywords for us here today, and then I'm going to show you them. Look at the words that I had highlighted. A1 students can understand questions and instructions addressed carefully and slowly to him or her and follow short, simple directions. You see, so the keywords are here: carefully, slowly, follow. So you see that some students at the very beginning or as A1 learners, they really wanted to understand things really fast. And at first, they do complain that when they are watching a movie, they can't understand. But then some students, they also are not aware of what it takes to be an A1 learner. So, by showing students what is expected at that point, might help you, as Eduardo had mentioned, to align expectations. So, teachers can also take informed decisions when bringing some materials to learners and also assessing if their own lessons they are according to the level. Because we do tend to make some mistakes in choosing some material, but we don't grade the language the way that it is supposed to help learners. The idea is not for you to just use A1 materials, but even if you are using authentic material, you should be able to get the material in a way that you don't grade the material, but you grade the language that you're going to be exposing the student. So you can use a snippet from a movie, but you, as this is an A1 learner, you are not going to ask this learner to focus on lengthy exchanges. You're going to ask him to recognize a number or to recognize directions, recognize personal information. So you can You can work with authentic material for A1 learners, but the way that you're going to deal with language is going to be way different. So here, another thing that it is very interesting, it is to check and to share with the students as a checklist what they can perform better. So week by week, referring them back to the can do descriptors might help you to also make learners better understand the lesson objective. So for instance, if students they complain that you are exposing them to the alphabet or to numbers or to personal information exchanges, tell these students how important it is for them to master this by the end of the A1 or going to an A2 level. Some students they struggle with getting personal information or to filling in forms. So I do have to constantly remind them that it is also part of their learning process to be exposed to those situations. So then, as teachers, getting the descriptors and being more, empowered with them might help us to make better decisions. That's why I wanted to share with you before we moved on a little bit. So then I have to share this quote with you. Some teachers, Eduardo and I, we are, like-minded today. Eduardo mentioned that some teachers they focus too much on grammar, structure, and some teachers have beliefs when it comes to learning and teaching the language. For instance, some teachers they do believe that the students they needed to master simple past in order to be exposed to present perfect. I'm sorry to bring this news to you, but you don't have to. Actually, students they don't have to fully master the simple past in order to be exposed to present perfect. So if we do think about this, just simple past, present perfect, we believe that learning it is this linear process, and it isn't. Remember I told you some of my B1 B2 students they still make some mistakes when it comes to simple present. So then the idea is here, students they have different ways of learning. Actually they have different learning preferences as well. Some students they will master one skill better than the other, so this idea of learning being something linear it doesn't help much. So this is something that you can tell the students as well, and then I do tell some of my students that they don't need to fully master that topic in order to move to the next one. Actually, the organization from the books, it is something that was standardized to help teachers and to help learners to see some sense of progress, but it is not something written in stone that right after the simple past learners master simple past they will immediately master present perfect and then they will immediately master past perfect. So this is a conversation that we need to have. Okay, so then I'd like to also bring your attention to this quote here. The CFR helps us to m- bring students to this point in that proficiency is seen as something more positive than deficiency. This is why working on the can do's might help you to help your learners to see their sense of progress, and for teachers as well, because then teachers if they focus more on can do's, chances are that you're going to give a way more positive feedback for learners as well. Then I would like to also bring something for you here, that this CFR action oriented approach represents this shift away from the syllabuses based on a linear progression. Remember, I told you about that learning is not linear, right? So here, the CFR brings us to these syllabuses more based on needs analysis oriented towards real life tasks. So here students they we needed to help them to see the purpose in doing those activities. So I always ask my learners when I'm teaching numbers or alphabet or describing routines or even when it gets to the simple past, how can you apply into your daily life? How would you use at work? Can you give me one example at work? Do you use numbers at work? Give me one example. So then they see this real life applicability of the subject they are studying. So I usually start my lesson with a lesson objective, and from this lesson objective, we brainstorm some situations in which they would use that point. So, for instance, exchanging personal information. That's if I start my lesson with exchanging personal information, I get to the point to see at least three situations in which they would use at work, at school, if they go to an exchange program. So I try to board their contributions, and then we organize in a way that if they don't know how to say, I encourage them to use the expressions, how do you say? Or teacher, how do you pronounce? So I try to build this confidence with my students so they feel free to ask me the questions. So I really try to get from the lesson objective and to brainstorm some ideas with them so they see that real life applicability of that. So here, having said that, now that we know a little bit more about the CFR, I'd like to tell you something about the other levels. And this is a quote from the document that I've shown you when I first started. Like the colors of the rainbow, language proficiency is actually a continuum. Yet, as with the rainbow, despite the fuzziness of the boundaries between colors, we tend to see some colors more than others. So, when students are transitioning to the A2 level, we still see some of the characteristics of an A1 learner, but we can see more the other colors. We can see more the other step into the CFR. So it doesn't mean that an A1 learner, it is just an A1 learner. We need to help students to transition to the other levels. And then I brought to you here the levels if you're not familiarized with them. And teachers often ask me, Tami, do I have to use a particular teaching methodology to apply the CFR? Not at all. Um, and then I brought this quote from that document that mentions here. The CFR raises questions rather than giving answers. Okay, it does not prescribe any particular pedagogic approach. So here it is, you can apply and try to use the can do's with whichever methodology or approach that you use. The idea here is not to just sell one methodology or one approach, but within your approach, you would be able to apply the can do's. So here, after we have seen a bit more from the can do's, the same document brings that this overall language proficiency entails different competences. We have the general competences that involve different kinds of knowledge, such as the knowledge from the language, the ability to do, act, speak appropriately, social skills, learning to learn. As you can see, the overall language proficiency, it is not only one thing. So when we get students into different boxes of the A1, it is something way broader, it is way bigger, because it also involves different kinds of communicative language competences, such as the linguistic competence, social linguistic, and pragmatic competence. And we do have the other competences such as communicative language activities, communicative language strategies. So you see that the person who aims proficiency, it is way more than learning structures, as Eduardo was mentioning for us here before. So here, no worries if you can take a picture of it, but in that document that I told you about, there's everything, and then you have examples of reception, production, interaction, mediation as well. Okay. So then, moving a bit, we're going to focus on some skills that we also needed to take into account for our A1 learners. Social skills, if you were not aware of what they are socially, I'm going to put here, social skills are socially appropriate learned behaviors that facilitate positive communication and interactions with other people. We tend to forget to teach this to A1 learners, either because we believe that they are going to master this later on, or because of our beliefs that is these students at this very early stage of learning won't need it. I don't know if you have ever experienced this. Some students at the first level, especially A1 level, they feel a bit shy to react, or they feel a bit shy to practice their pronunciation. Something that I usually do with my students at a very, very low level is to practice on turn taking, inviting the other people to join the conversation, and reactions. So I usually teach them to react from the day zero, like saying, "Oh, really? How nice! How cool! And you? What about you?" Because we needed to plan for this moment as well. Students are not going to be just reading dialogues by reacting to "Good morning." "Good afternoon. How are you? Where are you from?" So I make sure I teach them some starters such as "so," "well," to help them to build this competence as well. And besides social skills, we are also practicing on their linguistic. We're helping them to build on their linguistic competence. Linguistic competence implies that grammar and vocabulary should not be taught in isolation. Instead, they should be introduced within themes and topics. And this might be a mistake at the first levels, because we tend to have some loose sentences to students to react or to talk. So I try to build the lessons in which there is a lesson objective. You shouldn't see the real life applicability of that. And then I'm always asking them to do things within themes and topics to help them to build more in this linguistic competence. Moving on, there's also the social linguistic competence, and this refers to the ability to select topics that are appropriate for a communicative event. So, when I help learners to build on the ability to break the ice, I usually have them select which topics would be touchy topics for a conversation and which topics would be the most acceptable topics. So, this is also important to plan and anticipate for A1 lessons. Moving a bit, the pragmatic competence, it is the ability to produce and comprehend discourse, that it is adequate to the language to social cultural context in which interaction takes place. So this ability helps the students to select the topics, to select the register formal, informal. So which situation am I? Am I going to join a meeting? Am I going to join a very formal conversation with my learners? So that's pretty important. Moving a bit, uh, I brought here for us to see some functional language from the A1 to the A2 level. You can see that, as I had mentioned before, there is some fuzziness as the colors of the rainbow, because as you can see, the second topic in the first box, it is describing habits and routines, and the first topic in the second box, it is describing habits and routines. The difference here, when the students are exposed to uh, habits and routines again, will be this moment of expanding, actually this moment of revisiting and expanding what they already know. So you see that A1 and A2 learners, they build on this confidence in the topic. So you can also compare, if you have the chance to teach students when they are A1 and when they are A2, it is a great thing to show their sense of progress, to ask them, how confident do you feel now about talking about your routine? Last year, or the previous semester, do you think you were able to perform the same way? How did you describe your routine before, and how do you describe it now? How many language items do you use more? Or students, they become more curious, so they build this confidence to ask you more things. So this is something very good for teachers to be aware of. Is my student going to be exposed to this again? And how can I help him, her, them to revisit and expand on that topic? So then I brought first here a activity, a course book activity for A1 learners. This is a book that I used to use here. I'm going to show you a page from the activity, and then I'm going to show you and invite you to look at the way that I have adapted this activity for my learners. So this is the course book page. Look at it. You see, the title is about grammar, verb be, WH questions, and there was the language in context. Listen to the conversation, complete the sentences below. So, as you can see, this is not the first lesson, but this is um, inside a book for A1 learners. Students would need to listen for more specific information because they need to complete here. Jordan is 10 years old. His birthday is in the month of. So they would need to focus on more specific information. I thought that I would take more advantage of this activity if I changed the picture. Would you say that this picture tells us a lot about what is going on in this conversation? Take a look at it. I'm going to let you look for a minute. Okay, so then come with me. I'm going to show you what I had done. The choice of the pictures. So I don't really feel that the previous picture would help my students to wouldn't help my students to set the mood for the task. Here we don't know what this man might be doing. Is he a student? So I really wanted to set a context for students to listen to, and also to help them to activate their previous knowledge or to relate to the picture. And as a Brazilian teacher, I thought it would be great for me to look for pictures that portrayed a more diverse environment. So I got this picture from a website that I like very much, which is Nappy. It is NAPPY.com. It portrays pictures of Black people in different situations. So we do know that it is difficult to find more inclusive and diverse pictures. So that's a website that you can go for. And you can use the pictures there because you're not going to pay for them. So then I decided to change the picture at first. And then I decided to break the activity down a little bit. So, first of all, I asked the students to write 5 keywords to describe the picture. So, I'd like to set the mood and then to work on the word level first rather than the sentence level. Moving a bit, this is, oh, by the way, this is a screenshot from this lesson that I had taught. As you can see, my student wrote, two people. This her interactions are the purple interactions. Meet, men's, work, job, black, glasses. And she asked me what would be the difference between man, and men. And then she really likes to know the grammar terms. And she asked me as well the difference between meet and meeting. So then that's why I boarded for her. So as you can see, this student is really curious. She wants to know everything. I do have some groups that are a bit less curious. One-to-one students, they tend to be a bit more outgoing, I would say. But she asked me about it. And it was way better for me to set the mood for the activity like this rather than just referring her to that picture. Moving a bit, what we did was I introduced the context. I created this story. I told her that this is Jordan, and then I pointed out, and a salesperson. Jordan wants to buy a new car. The salesperson needs to ask some personal information. And what I did before was I checked if she knew what the personal information was. And then I asked her to give me some examples of personal information. And then we boarded. This slide I skipped, but it's all right. We boarded examples of personal information. And then I checked with her. And the next step would be to listen to the conversation and check if those questions that she understood from personal information were present in the conversation. So I used the things that she did, that she came up with, to help her with the task. Moving a bit, when we were listening for the second time, I asked her to take a look at the numbers, and I invited her to tell me which pieces of information she would be looking for when listening to. So then I boarded here in orange. Last name, Jordan is from. I asked her, what kind of information do you need? Do you need last name? Do you need a city? Do you need the place of origin? Another one was number 3 and number 4. So then here I helped her again to be more selective when listening to the task. As you can see, this task he hadn't spelled, so I wouldn't be correcting the way that she had written it. So then I let this way. I hadn't corrected. But then when we checked this script, and now I show her the script. After she had listened to it, she had understood the context. I had given her the opportunity to react to the task, to try by herself, and then I showed her the script. And then at this moment, I asked her, listen, let's take a look at your previous exercise. Did you write it correctly? And then she said, no, teacher, I hadn't written. But mind you, during the actually in this listening they don't spell, so this is why I hadn't corrected. And then I she had the chance. And then after that, we performed, and then we personalized the task. I changed her name, I covered something here for her to personalize and to use her own name or to come up with any other name. So here, as you can see, this student, she was introduced to the task in a smoother way, and then to get to the point, which was the WH questions. So over here, you see that there is this journey actually in the exercise that it took me a while, but it was a way better. And then I thought it was way more productive than doing the task as it was previously. So here, we also need to think about what kind of support have we been providing students with? Are the instructions for the task clear? Have you checked if they know what they are supposed to do? Are there prompts that so students can resort to? When I mean prompts, so written instructions, prompts that they need to use, such as I think, I don't think so. I think so too. So, whenever I'm trying to build on confidence for students, I include some prompts for them to use throughout the class. And also modeling. Modeling would be of the essence over here. So, other strategies that I consider really important are these: to provide this clear context, pictures, choices of pictures, they tell stories. Pictures tell stories. Great language while speaking to them and in the tasks. Provide prompts that I had mentioned before. Avoid those open ended questions such as, what do you think? What's your opinion? Going for more, checking questions such as, do you? are you? Is he from Brazil? Is she from Brazil? Just to avoid asking vague questions for students. And as I have mentioned, to favor this yes no questions for learners. So here, we demanding high or demanding more from students has also to do with the kind of support that you provide them with. So how can you demand higher from your student if you haven't scaffolded that way, actually, if you haven't provided enough support for them to build? We also needed to provide students with something that I believe it is essential, which is thinking time. Some teachers, they can't handle silence in class all the time. I struggle with that as well, but I do provide this moment for my students to think. So I usually tell them, you have 30 seconds to think. And for 30 seconds, I'm not there. And then I ask their opinion. They need this time to come up with their own hypothesis. They do need some thinking time. Okay. Let them rehearse. Whenever you ask them to perform any speaking activity, okay, and talking about speaking, don't forget about providing them with thinking time. Let them rehearse. After they have performed, give them feedback, ask them to redo the task. This will be essential. And modeling. So I guess if we take into account this, and then if when we anticipate those moments for students, we I'm not saying that this is the recipe for success. Okay, everyone has a different way of, reacting or building their lessons. But I'm saying that there are some strategies and some activities that we can grade, or we can anticipate some difficulties from A1 learners. And then I really wanted to finish my session today with some ideas for you, some competences that A1 learners, they need to work on, such as for strategic competence, establish contact with people using simple words, phrases, ask someone to repeat, say it slowly. So here it is a bit of a profile of an A1 learner. So it might help you to assess the materials that you have been using or the classes that you have been planning. And I'd like to thank you so much for receiving me today. It was a pleasure to be here. If you wanted to get in touch with me, that's my Instagram and that's my email as well. If you want to receive these slides, just email me at simplifica.consult@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for being with me today. And then I wish you a semester full of accomplishments. Thank you all very, very much.